Okay, we've begun? Okay, well,
We are.
I am happy to present this information again about happiness and mental health. It's born out of a lecture that I gave about 15 years ago at Catch the Spirit, and I had forgotten all about it, and I found it in my computer, and I thought this could be relevant again at this time, so I took it out and was happy with what I found and inspired to add some more. And so it's a revised lecture from 15 years ago that I think has been improved. So with that, I'm very happy to present you with this material that I think is timely and helpful, and it's an honor to be able to offer something that I think is so useful. Okay. Having said that, I will now read from my prepared remarks. Happiness is what everybody wants. And happiness can take many forms. It, in some cases, might be defined as feeling excited, or in other cases, might be defined as feeling calm. The type of happiness one might pursue is determined by one's ever-changing focus. Sometimes an individual may choose more exciting forms of happiness when they're focusing on their future, or more calming options when focusing on the present moment. Definitions of happiness abound, and they are varied. Over the past decade, the concept of happiness has enjoyed a lot of attention from among researchers across many disciplines. Psychologists, economists, and sociologists, and even theologians have all made tremendous strides in determining best measures and practices for happiness. Advertisers are hungry for profits. They already knew that people were attracted to happiness. Nestle's Nesquik claims you can buy happiness. You can't buy happiness, but you can drink it. Dunkin' Donuts promoted a breakfast sandwich as the happiest sandwich on earth. Nivea offers a body lotion, Happy Sensation. Hugo Boss offers Orange, the fragrance of happiness. And Clinique similarly offers a perfume named Clinique Happy. Yet despite all this eternal interest in happiness, an empirical understanding of what happiness means in terms of how it's experienced is still limited. So exactly what is happiness? Most of us probably don't believe we need a formal definition of happiness. We know it when we feel it. And we often use the term to describe a range of positive emotions, including joy and satisfaction and contentment and gratitude and the like. But to understand the causes and effects of happiness, researchers first needed to define it. Many of them use terms interchangeably for what boils down to a subjective sense of well-being. They measure that by asking people, how satisfied do they feel with their own lives? And how much positive and negative emotion are they experiencing? In her 2007 book, The How of Happiness, positive psychology researcher Sonia Lyubomirsky elaborates, describing happiness as, quote, the experience of joy and contentment, of positive well-being combined with a sense that one's life is good and meaningful and worthwhile. So happiness then is a combination of spiritual and mental and physiological activities. Let's see if I can get. It's also known scientifically that feelings are accompanied by chemical substrates, molecules of emotions that course through our bodies. Wherever a thought goes, a molecule follows. And those molecules affect one's biology and one's experience and perception of life. Negative thoughts produce arousal chemicals, or fight, flight, freeze, fold up chemicals. Positive thoughts produce beneficial neurochemicals for happiness. So while happiness is both the fleeting positive emotions that come with joy and finding a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in life, it also has underlying it a chemical reality. Happiness is truly woven into every aspect of human life. Aristotle wrote, "Happiness is the meaning and purpose of life, the whole aim and the end of human existence." Every behavior people make in the end has this spiritual goal, one of achieving happiness. It boils down to something like this. I want harmony. I want peace. I want laughter. I want love. I want to be happy. So let's look at this possibility then, this potential called happiness, one of numerous possible subjective states of being that underlie our daily experience of life. We know that when it happens, it's something that happens inside a person. It's personal. One experiences a subjective state of joy, of ease. It's effortless, spontaneous, unrehearsed. People have described happiness as though they were in the flow. Things seem to naturally happen as though they're supposed to. In positive psychology, being in the flow is also called being in the zone. That's a subjective state in which a person performing some activity is fully immersed in a feeling. They feel energized, focused, fully involved, and enjoying the process of the activity. In essence, flow or zone is characterized by the complete absorption in what one does and a resulting transformation in one's sense of time. If you're using spiritual descriptors for being in this happiness flow or zone, you might say, the hand of God was on me, or I saw the light, or you might describe yourself as being in a state of grace, or you may say, you felt that God was on your side. If you're into meaningful coincidences, or what are called synchronicities, you may feel happiness when you feel that you happen to be in the right place at the right time, experiencing lots of serendipity and things just working out. Or you might even say that you had a run of real good luck. These are some of the ways of describing what I'm aiming at when I try to define this happiness for you. And this is what I'm inviting you to look at with me as we explore this. It means being in tune with the elements and the forces of the physical world and the whole creation, of which we are all unique expressions. So, what hampers people from experiencing this organic, natural state of happiness? There are several ways people typically sabotage their own happiness. First off, we have the if-onlys. Oh, if only I had that house with the view, I'd be so happy. My trip to work would be so nice if I had that new car. When we continually need material possessions to feel happy, we are creating a mirage in our head. Appreciating what you have, not what you don't have, will bring truer happiness. Another happiness killer, but harder to detect, is one's own self-righteous attitude. Judging others that don't seem to have the same beliefs or values or moral compass can eliminate a lot of friends. Without friends, life can be very lonely. Diversity can help be a good thing, especially if you have quality, loving people in your life. It's okay for others to see things differently than you do. Accept people just the way they are. And hopefully they'll respond in kind. And feeling jealous? If you can't be happy for others, your mind will never know peace. Someone will always make more money, drive a nicer car, have youth on their side, or be in that perfect relationship. If we learn to address these negative thoughts and feelings, we can eliminate them before they have a chance to rob us of our happiness. To someone going through a difficult time, your life is pretty good right now, but you have to have eyes to see it. Another limit on people's happiness is dependency. Few things make a person unhappy more than depending on someone for a perfect love, when all you can get from them is an imperfect love. If you're dependent on other people for happiness, happiness will be short-lived. No one is perfect. Someday, those you cling to will let you down in some way or another, and it will be up to you to make yourself smile again. Setting unrealistic goals is often the source of our unhappiness. Sometimes we have to face reality and not confuse our dreams and bucket list ideas with our daily goals. Set realistic goals and time aside to tackle the projects you need to get done, just a little each week. Need that closet cleaned? Take one shelf at a time. Even if it's just 10 minutes per night, you'll accomplish something, and that'll feel better than making an elephant task list that you know you'll never keep. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's kind of hard. Dependency or abusing substances like caffeine or alcohol or other things to alter your mood are big no-nos. Anytime we need something to fill a void, that fix will be short-lived too. The real issues still remain. At some point, they'll need to be addressed head-on. There are a lot of factors that mess with the chemicals in our brains. If you feel unhappy 24/7, maybe it's time to get some more help. Breaking free from the bindings often requires action. The bottom line is that many people put self-imposed conditions on their happiness. Yet when we really break it down, happiness must come first. If one is happy, one will be free. If one is happy, one will be healthier. If one is happy, one will have better relationships, do their best work, a work that will be meaningful for yourself, personally, as well as for others. If you're happy, you're going to be more successful and therefore inevitably more abundant in your daily living. Haven't we gotten the equation backwards? Don't we think that we have to obtain the goodies first before we can be happy? When, as it turns out, we might need to be happy first in order to acquire and enjoy any of the good things life has to offer. Spiritual traditions of the world also come to this conclusion. Jesus' words are recorded in the New Testament. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Or Moses might say, obey the first commandment, and all these good things will come to you. The Happy Planet Index is a measure taken every year using Gallup polling to measure how well nations are doing at achieving long, happy, sustainable lives. Scientists report that the happiest people in the world are the people living in Finland, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and the Netherlands. The U.S., with all its wealth and material abundance, did not do as well in the happiness ratings, yet it does make a respectable 19th place, with Afghanistan and South Sudan ranked last. In an article from Psychology Today, Suzanne White writes, money won't make you like yourself any more than you do if you're poor. We are going to be who we are regardless of what we earn. And the friends that money buys are not the type of friends that are there because they like you. They're often there because of what you earn, not what you bring to the relationship. So like Solomon found out when he stated, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Money and nice stuff doesn't deliver to you lasting happiness. Yet certainly neither does poverty. Oscar Wilde, the Irish poet and playwright, once said, the only people who think more about money more than the rich are the poor. In fact, the poor think of nothing else. In Proverbs we read, give me neither poverty nor riches. Scads of research has shown that materialism, whether it's the materialism that comes from being rich or the materialism that comes from being poor, materialism depletes our happiness, threatens satisfaction with our relationships, harms the environment, renders us less friendly, less likable, and empathic, and makes us less likely to help others and contribute to our communities. At the micro level, materialistic people are less satisfied and less grateful for their own lives, have less purpose, feel less competent in general, are more antisocial, and have weaker connections with others. Not surprisingly, perhaps, when it comes to relationships, those with materialistic goals not only rate their own social interactions more negatively, but people in general rate their relationships with materialists as less satisfying as well. The obsession with stuff that some rich people show is bad. Yet being poor probably means you're being preoccupied with getting enough material stuff too, enough material to survive today. Your happiness necessarily suffers as you do what you must do to just get by. But the same loss of happiness occurs very often when you have lots of stuff as when you have not enough. Basically, materialism renders you less happy, less grateful, less friendly, less likable, less empathic, and less purposeful. In the pursuit or defense of material, one becomes antisocial, egotistic, incompetent, and even unfriendly. Back in the late 1990s, the American Psychiatric Association adopted the term positive psychology, referring to this great aha discovery that happy people are generally healthier people. They developed an acronym, PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. It stands for positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments. Anything that boosts our positive emotion, engagement in life roles, relationships, personal meaning, and accomplishment is likely to increase our overall well-being and positive mental health. Positive psychology begins by recognizing that our subjective experiences of happiness translate into a biological experience of well-being, the well-being of our planet, our corporations, academic and religious institutions, our economy, our environment, the well-being of our communities, and the well-being of ourselves. We don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. The world is as we are. Mahatma Gandhi said, we have to be the change we want to see in the world. Do you want to see a happier world? Be happy. Make other people happy. Researchers have presented us with a formula for happiness that distills down to some essential ingredients. In a big way, it depends on how we see things. The way we see things and frame them in our mind is called by positive psychologists our mindset. Mindset. determines our behavior and our perception. Is the glass half full or half empty speaks of a person's mindset. Mindsets explain why some people, when they see a problem, they worry and panic, and other people, when they see the same problem, see opportunity. Your beliefs play a pivotal role in what you want and whether you achieve it. When those beliefs become set, that forms your mindset. It plays a significant role in determining achievement, success, and happiness. Mindsets can be divided into two different types: fixed and growth. Fixed mindsets believe that achievement and success and happiness are qualities inborn, fixed, unchangeable. Growth mindsets understand that these abilities can be developed and strengthened by way of commitment and hard work. Many people use both types of mindsets early in life, often through the way they were raised or their experiences in school. Fixed mindsets teach children that they should look smart and get A's instead of loving learning. They become more concerned with how they're being judged and fear that they might not live up to expectations. Growth mindsets, however, teach us to explore and embrace new experiences and to enjoy challenges. Rather than seeing mistakes as setbacks, people with growth mindsets are willing to try new things, make errors, all in the name of learning and achieving their potential. When toddlers learn to walk, they show growth mindsets. Imagine if a toddler tried to learn to walk 2-3 times and fell over. So, well, that's not for me. I guess I'm going to have to figure out a way to get around without walking. I tried it a few times. It's not my cup of tea. Fortunately for all of us, early in life we had a growth mindset and we were able to master this challenge of walking. Having a growth mindset, though, doesn't involve believing that anyone can become anything they want with enough education and effort. Not everyone can become an Einstein or a Mozart just because they try. Instead, the growth mindset is about living up to one's potential. This potential, however, is never really knowable. Just how far can a person go if they set their mind to it? People with a growth mindset believe that the effort that goes into learning and deepening their understanding and talent is well worth all the toil and trouble. Your mindset plays a critical role in how you cope with life's challenges. In school, a growth mindset can contribute greater achievement and increased effort. When facing a problem such as trying to find a new job or another new chapter in life, people with growth mindsets show greater resilience. They're more likely to persevere in the face of setbacks, while those with fixed mindsets are more liable to give up. In her book, Mindset, Carol Dweck writes that fixed mindsets tend to create a need for approval. She writes, I quote, "I've seen so many people with this one consuming goal of proving themselves. In the classroom, in their careers, and in their relationships, every situation calls for a confirmation of their intelligence, personality, or character. Every situation is evaluated. Will I succeed or fail? Will I look smart or dumb? Will I be accepted or rejected? Will I feel like a winner or a loser?" Growth mindsets, on the other hand, result in a hunger for learning new ideas, a desire to work hard and discover new things, to tackle challenges and grow as a person. When people with a growth mindset try and fail, they tend to view the failure or disappointment as a learning experience. While people with a fixed mindset might not agree with this, many experts agree that people are capable of changing their mindset. Our mindset, fixed or growth, becomes a biological set point or baseline. It becomes a conditioned set of responses that determines beforehand whether one sees a problem or one sees a golden opportunity. Some scientists believe that this is genetically determined, but that doesn't mean that our genes have the final say in how we learn to see the world. Environmental factors like learning and growing are as powerful as heredity in shaping and altering set point and their patterns of choices and perceptions. Research has shown that you can take psychopharmaceuticals that alter the biological set point. This is usually paired here with some kind of a warning about people popping pills like Tic Tacs. And we certainly have a serious opioid epidemic in our country that has killed so many. We call the drugs that we take for depression serotonin reuptake inhibitors because they change the chemistry in our brains. A person may feel happier for a while when taking some of these, but as we all know, they all have side effects. And in addition, they often stop working well. They are given to depressed people under the banner of antidepressants. Antidepressants don't actually make you happy. There's a reason antidepressants are called antidepressants and not mood uppers or mood boosters or happy makers. It's because they work to reduce depression. That's what they're capable of doing for some people. SSRIs work to increase levels of serotonin. That's one of those happy neurotransmitters we saw at the beginning. Our body's serotonin level is thought to affect not only mood and emotions, but the quality of sleep as well. The hope of pharmacologists is that if you up these serotonin levels in your body, you'll lessen the symptoms of depression. But think about that. We're talking about artificially lessening the symptoms of depression, not piling on positive emotions to fill the space. These drugs work on bodies with low levels of serotonin by increasing them. They don't add excess serotonin when your brain has plenty. Antidepressants don't make you happy. Instead, when they work, they allow you to function. And by function, I mean being able to pursue learning and growth and a lot of the things that bring achievement that we'll look at here, things that will bring success and happiness. And this happiness, as we started out saying, is a tricky thing to define when you don't have it, and it's a tricky thing to appreciate even if you do have it. Depressed people often just want to get to a point where they can get out of bed and go to work and not feel filled with despair or anger or numbness. Antidepressants get rid of or lessen those symptoms. That doesn't mean you're magically happy. You then have to make effort, sometimes even push yourself to do all the stuff we're going to talk about here, stuff that's necessary to take care of yourself. Antidepressants are functioning pills. They're not miserable pills. They take the fangs and the claws out of the symptoms when they work so that you can work towards changing your set point, moving to a more favorable, lasting happiness. The SSRIs take the sharp edge off depression when they work. They in no way provide happiness or contentment or joy, but they might help you out of excruciation and despair well enough that you can start thinking about what to actually do that would make you happy. A second method for altering one's biological set point is called meditation. Everybody's heard of this by now. And although the practice of meditation is thousands of years old, research on its health benefits is still ongoing and promising. A research review published in the Journal of American Medicine Internal Medicine in January 2014 found meditation helpful for relieving anxiety, pain, and depression, and found that for depression, meditation was about as effective as antidepressants. Meditation is thought to work by acting beneficially on our sympathetic nervous system. That's where the fight or flight, freeze or fold up responses are made by our body's autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system increases heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure during times of perceived threat or stress. Meditation gives the body what it needs to calm these fight, flight, freeze, fold messages. Meditation comes in many, many forms. I'll just mention a few. Concentration meditation is really the foundation of so many other forms of meditation. Heart-centered meditation, which we'll look at here briefly in our study of happiness, involves quieting the mind and bringing your awareness down to the heart. Your heart is an energy center, an information center, a center of intelligence right in the middle of your chest. There's mindfulness meditation, which we'll look at also, which encourages you to focus objectively on negative thoughts and feelings and sensations. And by doing so, you can help provide your body with what it needs to create homeostasis or equilibrium or a state of calm. There's Tai Chi and Qigong. Those are moving forms of meditation that combine physical exercise with breathing and concentration. There's transcendental meditation, which is well-known techniques where, we'll look at them here, where you repeat a mantra, a word, a phrase, a sound, or a quiet thought, and it helps you to achieve greater awareness and consciousness. There's walking meditation, which turns your focus to both the body and mind as you breathe in time with your footsteps. For beginners at meditating, it may be helpful trying out different types of meditation. You might try to attend meditation classes given in your community to see which technique best suits you. Meditating with a group of people is a much more powerful experience, and having a teacher talk you through the technique will make it much easier at first. Many meditation classes are free or inexpensive, and that probably means that whoever's leading it is a person truly devoted to the practice. The beauty and the simplicity of meditation is that you don't need any equipment, just a quiet place, a few minutes each day. Start with 15 minutes, or even commit to 5 minutes 3 times a day, preferably practicing this introspective, reflective behavior at the same time every morning. That way, you'll establish the habit, and pretty soon you'll find yourself naturally wanting to meditate in the morning, just like wanting tea or coffee. The specifics of your practice will depend on which type of meditation you choose, but I'm going to now give you a little thumbnail sketch. Set aside a place to meditate. You'll build a special memory pattern there, a relationship, a feeling there, making it easier to get into a meditative gear more quickly. Surround your meditation spot with inspiring things, scriptures, candles, fresh flowers, incense, or any object that as you focus on that, you find some inspiration and meaning in that. It could be a photo, a stone, a rock, a crucifix, or some religious symbol. So you sit comfortably in a chair or on the floor with your back as straight as you are comfortable making it, and you close your eyes or focus your gaze on the object you've chosen, and you breathe slowly and deeply and gently. Keep your mind focused inward or on the object. If it wanders, that's nothing unusual. Gently steer it back to the center. Follow your own breath. With each breath, imagine bringing in peace and quiet into your heart and mind. While you're breathing out, imagine your breath as a river or a tide that's carrying all your thoughts away for a while. You might try praying or chanting out loud while in this state. Some people use the word Om. I'm sure you've When you hear people say meditate, you probably hear, well, that's a word that means the sound of the universe, sound of the logos. Some people pair that with the Sanskrit word shanti, om shanti, which means peace. Or some use the word maranatha, which means even so, come, Lord. You can choose a word that suits you. Love, forgiveness, whatever works for you. A word from your own religious tradition. Chanting out loud can help a lot in overcoming unwanted thoughts and bringing stillness to the mind. Within just a week or two of regular meditation, you should see a noticeable change in the mood and stress level. People report feelings of increased peace and inner poise, even in the midst of their busy, chaotic lives. I encourage you to consider some form of meditation in your daily life. It's been scientifically shown to change our old conditioning, our old biologically fixed mindsets. Yet meditating has a spiritual dimension too. In the Old Testament, book of Joshua, one reads of meditation that you shall meditate day and night upon the word and its precepts. The psalmist prays to God, let the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. Psalmists and scientists alike have shown that meditation techniques produce favorable physiological changes. It activates the brain's prefrontal cortex, which is the place in the brain that turns on other parts of the brain and begins to produce all those happy-making neurotransmitters we saw, serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, and other opiates. Those neurotransmitters somehow synchronistically orchestrate a dance between themselves. Literally, meditation joins you in a biological, spiritual, mental dance of your soul. The psalmist writes, I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Consider the biology of all our emotions for a minute. Everything you feel comes from the body naturally producing hormones, neurotransmitters. So when you're feeling the intense power of love, for example, you're experiencing the secretion of these chemical messengers, and these particular chemical messengers make you feel happy. Meditation produces in our bodies a biochemical reaction, a way of favorably changing our body's biological wiring, changing its set point for happiness. There's a third way to change our conditioning or neural wiring, change those biological set points. It's through the use of cognitive therapy. Cognitive therapy works to shift old neural patterns and dismantle false beliefs that make us depressed. There's been many times in my work as a provider of mental health service that someone has expressed exasperation about the need to discuss their childhood and their past because they simply do not see its relevance to their presenting situation. It's understandable that people want help with the present situation that's the source of their discomfort. And there are times when a very brief type of psychotherapy, called solution-based therapy, can succeed in helping an individual find a solution to some difficulty in which they find themselves. More often than not, even present-day problems have their roots in the past. The reason for many problems being rooted in the past is that even when we want to forget certain unpleasant memories, the human brain is structured to remember. Why? How is this so? Most of us are aware of the fact that it's difficult and impossible to remember specific memories before a certain age. Many people can describe memories or events as early as age 4 or 5, but have a more difficult time once they get to age 3. Earlier than age 3, old memories are no longer describable. The reason for this is the fact that we didn't have words to label the events that surrounded our beings at that time. But does this mean that the brain has no memories stored away from birth to age 3? It might surprise some to learn that we all have memories stored in our brains from the earliest stages imaginable. A few details then about our body. The amygdala and the hippocampus are small parts of the brain that sit perched on the ledge above the brainstem. The spinal cord runs down from the brainstem on top of the spinal cord. The amygdala and the hippocampus are important parts of our primitive brain. Both structures are important in learning because the amygdala measures the importance of emotional matters and stores emotional memories, while the hippocampus stores facts. The amygdala and its functioning is crucial in what happens to us as emotional beings. A person doesn't need words to remember emotional events. The amygdala stores emotional memories without words, recycling nondescript emotional content dating back to the beginning, at birth. To a large extent, these emotional memories are what Freud and Jung would have referred to as unconscious, since there are no words for the forgotten events. Put from another angle, if a baby suffers trauma, it will grow up to be a person who will never remember the trauma in terms of words that can describe an event, but its brain will remember the fear and panic connected to the event. Later in life, when something happens that's triggering, that even remotely reminds the person of something fearful, the original fear will rise from its dormant slumber, instantly recycling the old neural pattern encoded in the nervous system from the earliest times of life. Then, once aroused from its dormancy, it creates a chemical cascade in our nervous system. The early feelings come back to be felt again, overpoweringly. When this happens, we say that we've been triggered by some event or person. And that's why some people have a startled reaction to something minor that wouldn't bother another individual. When something fearful occurs or something happens that reminds the amygdala of something fearful from the past, it immediately takes control and sends messages immediately to every part of the brain and the body to take action. Instantly, hormones begin to secrete, and the individual is in action, either to fight or flee, or to freeze and fold up. Under these circumstances, there is no conscious control. A person is being swept along by conditioning, by neurological action. It does this because the entire system has been operating in a conditioned way, running on autopilot. These triggering situations don't have to just involve fear alone. People who you see that become instantly angry or enraged are experiencing the same neurological crescendo of arousal hormone. While chemically activated or aroused under these circumstances, our cerebrum and neocortex, aptly called our ambassador brains, cannot play their mediating role over our reactions. Under normal circumstances, the ambassador brain, or the frontal lobes of the brain just behind our foreheads, control our reactions. What happens is that messages are sent from the amygdala, the emotional brain, to the frontal lobes of the ambassador brain, where the information is placed under consideration and evaluated and disposed of in an appropriate way by the ambassador. In other words, you have time to think about something. Part of the role of the best psychotherapy is to help people shift old memory patterns. The shifting effectively transfers information from the amygdala, the emotional primitive brain, through the therapy techniques to a relocated place in the cognitive side of the brain in the high centers of intellectual functioning. Relocating the information gives people greater self-control and helps them to see that they're no longer at the mercy of memories of trauma. Good therapy can break old conditioning and move biological set points by helping us to break our attachments to old patterns. Sometimes in the course of surviving, our minds latch onto an idea that's just not true, but one that nevertheless is held to be true and so it becomes true for that person. Cognitive approaches help people shift their view of things so that they can get rid of false beliefs. King Solomon liked counselors. He wrote, "Plans fail for lack of them, but with many advisors they succeed." And around the very same time that Solomon was penning these lines, Buddha, that great early pioneer of mind and psyche, was himself mapping out a way we could find blissful happiness if and when we changed our perception of who we are. We'll look more deeply at that in this study of happiness. But Buddha suggested, like Socrates in the West, that people who lead unexamined lives don't know who they are. Buddha and Socrates were two people helping to change the viewpoints and biological mindsets of many in the ancient world. Another ingredient of happiness that researchers find contributes to happiness is, not surprisingly, one's own life situation. The Germans coined the phrase "Sitz im Volksleben" to refer to all the various sociologically relevant aspects of the physical setting in which we live our lives. Do you own a big house? Are you wealthy and living in the lap of luxury? Surprisingly, this has very little to do with overall happiness. Researchers estimated that physical life situations contribute between 8% up to 15% of what it takes to make a person happy. This has a lot to do with our biological set points. For example, take the case of winning the lottery. You would probably be a lot happier for a few months. But if I came to you in 4 or 5 years from now and asked you how you are, you will almost certainly be exactly where you started out from before you won the lottery. The reverse is also true. If you have a major tragedy, the loss of a loved one, you go through a terrible divorce, you almost lose your leg in an accident, same thing. In a few years, you're exactly where you started from in your general level of happiness. You will return to your biological set point. It's so remarkable how our biologies, psychologies, our mind and our spirits adapt to major tragedies, but also to major events of good fortune and good luck. Another important ingredient of our Sitz im Leben that researchers of happiness have found to be helpful in understanding for personal happiness is to look sociologically at how we're relating to other people. It's our voluntary actions, the choices that we make in what we do on any given day that can lead us to pleasure, gratification, or better yet, that longer lasting happiness, which I call fulfillment. Think of the material things that give you pleasure and gratification. And the number one problem with them relative to our happiness is that these things that give such pleasure and gratification last only a short time. They're like a honeymoon, short but sweet. And while these things make contributions to our happiness, they're transient and temporary, ephemeral. Like milk from the supermarket, every good gift on earth has an expiration date. On the other hand, there's a much longer lasting happiness that I'd like to refer to as the happiness of wisdom, of fulfillment. Fulfillment is a deeper, more sustained feeling of gratification. Fulfillment makes people very happy. Fulfillment is when your brain is making all those beneficial neurochemicals. It occurs when we have a sense of accomplishment, when we feel that we're making a difference, not only in our personal lives, but also, so importantly to our happiness, making some difference in the lives of other people or animals or other parts of creation. Fulfillment results from aligning with the messages we receive from within. striving to listen to that still small voice within. It's the voice of insight or intuition. Fulfillment occurs when we feel inspired or make choices that are new ones, very conscious and deliberate ones. And fulfillment happens best when we're helping other people to lead fulfilling lives. Making other living beings happy brings great happiness. The best way to experience purer, sustained levels of happiness that I'm calling fulfillment, this deeper, longer lasting happiness in life, has been scientifically shown what one must do, what one must make life's business. And that's helping other people feel happier. Something profitable happens chemically in our bodies when we help other people. It's almost surefire every time. Works like a charm, nearly every time. It's so dependable they've made it into a rule. It's a rule because you can count on it. In fact, it's the golden rule. It synchronizes well with the message we heard this morning. It's part of many traditions in the world. A study on the golden rule was conducted by Bernard Rimland, director of the Institute of Child Behavior Research. Rimland found that the happiest people are those who help others. Each person involved in Rimland's study was asked to list 10 people he or she knew best and to label them as happy or not happy. Then they were to go through the list again and label each one as selfish or unselfish. Selfish was defined as a stable tendency to devote one's time and resources to one's own interests and welfare, an unwillingness to inconvenience one's self for others. In categorizing the results, Rimland found that all of the people labeled happy were also labeled unselfish. He wrote that those whose activities are devoted to bringing themselves happiness are far less likely to be happy than those whose efforts are devoted to making others happy. Rimland concluded that same thing that all the ancients have long said and tried to tell us. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There's some kind of alchemy or medicine or healing chemistry in this ancient golden rule. Is it just that pleasure shared or given is pleasure doubled? Is it the reciprocal nature of the rule that makes it work? If one wishes to feel like a success in life, make other people successful. If one wishes to experience happiness, make someone else happy. If one wants to be trusted, one must trust. If one wants to be respected, give respect. Is it reaping and sowing? What makes the golden rule so golden? It's central to many religious systems, this concept of fulfillment and wholeness through helping and serving. It acknowledges that we are all children of God, part of the whole universe, inseparably one with all that God has called into existence. It's all contained in one mind, one sacred consciousness. Let this mind be in you, writes the writer to the Philippians. The golden rule comes from the golden treasury of the mind of Christ. The gold that's in the golden rule comes from the oneness of God's mind. It's gold from a higher source. So even if we're blessed to have all the ideal ingredients in our life situation for happiness, we would still require the ignition key of this higher power. Whatever you conceive of it as. It's a higher power hidden in you and me that turns everything on in the right way in us, heals us, redeems us, makes us whole again as human beings, as families and communities. It's innately ours and can lead us, if we trust it, if we let it, to that nirvana-like happiness that Buddha referred his seekers to. When we learn to obtain the aid of that divine higher power hidden within, we then will experience an enduring and lasting happiness, or will catch glimpses of it. the golden happiness that belongs to wisdom, one that belongs to the kingdom of God. It's a happiness that lies undiscovered, mainly because it's not in our outer life's situation, but within us, as yet unseen. This higher, longer lasting happiness that's possible for us can't be attained or evoked by our biological mindset alone, or our life situation, or our voluntary actions alone. There's a lot of substance for right living to be found in the Golden Rule. It's not as easy as it may sound. It can be very challenging to apply it sometimes, and in some cases. That's because as human beings, we all have to go through the experience of suffering more than we'd like. Not that life is suffering, but that it contains suffering. Thankfully, our suffering is mixed well, amongst other things. It's mixed with joy and pleasure and fulfillment, perhaps enlightenment, but life contains suffering. People don't get too far in life before they know this. We are afflicted in every way with pebbles in our shoes and thorns in our flesh. There are causes for the suffering, like the cause Buddha is famous for having identified, and that quantum physicists David Bohm or Niels Bohr or Albert Einstein might agree with. Namely, we do not know the nature of true reality, and we do not know the true nature of our own self. Buddha and King Solomon both lived around the same time period in the ancient world. They each criticized grasping at and clinging to what is impermanent. Being afraid of the impermanent, identifying with socially induced hallucinations, propping up a false sense of forever identity, are all what philosopher and author Alan Watts called part of the dance of our skin-encapsulated egos. Many of the world's wisdom traditions state that all the manifold causes of human suffering lie in this first cause, namely, that we do not know ourselves. We do not know our own true nature, or the true nature of reality. In order to know this reality, we have to have a shift in our thinking, in awareness or consciousness. The Gospels are built on the understanding that this shift is required. This required changing of one's mind is called in the original Greek metanoia, or repentance, which is a word we use to connote changing of the mind frame, changing of one's outlook in life. Happiness and fulfillment require so often, first and foremost, a change of our consciousness. Consciousness is nothing more than where we intentionally direct our attention spans, our awareness, our witness. We are created as conscious, sentient beings observing in both time and space, who are witnessing at every moment, when we're not in deep sleep, some kind of encounter with life. This observing, conscious being, this seeing, this is our essential state of being. We are the seer of something. Someone put it like this: we are the flashlight, never what the flashlight shines on. We are human beings, not human thinkings, not human goings, not human doings. And this is a big shift in thinking. And it's a big piece of self-care that produces so much improvement. It involves expanding our ordinary consciousness. We can relate to expanding ordinary consciousness every day when we get up out of bed in the morning. We start with a low level of consciousness, and as the morning unfolds, or as the time unfolds, once we get out of bed, we discover we rise in consciousness, we become more functional. It follows that the more conscious we are, the more likely are we to get in touch with this happiness that comes from settling into our true nature and to true reality. Consciousness affects our thinking and behaving. This act of being present and observing that I'm calling consciousness even impacts how we feel and how our biology works. Scriptures tell us how people are created in the image of God, and more, that we're invited from the image's starting point to grow into the full likeness of God. Consciousness is the energy necessary for that growth. It's hard to define exactly what the energy of consciousness is. And in that regard, maybe consciousness is like God, who says to Moses, tell them, I am that I am sent you. It's a universal field. Our individual consciousness is part of this divine, cosmic, I am that I am universal field. And our consciousness is affected by this universal field in which we all live and move and have our being. We influence the field, and the field influences us. Paul referred to this back and forth influence to the mind when he admonishes us to pray without ceasing. Paul wants us to be more aware, more conscious of this ongoing conversation, this back and forth influence. Martin Buber, a famous Jewish theologian, discussed this phenomena when he described everything in life, whether we were aware of it or not, as a relationship between I and thou, a relationship between oneself and God. Like frolicking animals, we can experience a kind of happiness in the present moment, but unlike animals, we can move out of the present moment completely and into our imaginations. Being able to escape the present moment and use our imagination has had very great advantages for us, but it also has had its disadvantages. Escape into the imagination also causes what psychotherapists call existential suffering and dissociation. This is yet another important notion to remember in the discussion on happiness, that the capacity to leave the present moment and escape into our imagination, while it's a miraculous and God-given behavior that animals seem not to possess as profoundly as we do, that power to be up in our heads all the time is also a point of existential suffering for us. The imagination allows us to step out of the present moment, and it allows us to step out of what's really happening, to depart from reality and start living in a world that's not truly happening at all. Now, I want to conclude this segment by sharing a story. This is a story of a man who went on a quest to find truth. And he was not long on his journey before he met a holy man who lived on a mountaintop. And the traveler said to the holy man, "You look sad." And the holy man said, "I am disillusioned." The traveler asked, "Why?" And the holy man said, "All my life I've practiced different spiritual techniques. I've asked myself questions like, where does thought come from? What's the nature of our thinking? Why do we have negative thoughts? Why do we have positive thoughts? Where do they come from? Is there any meaning to our lives? Are we just here as a randomly mutated species in a random universe?" The disillusioned wise man asked questions like Carl Sagan might have asked. Our little blue dot called Earth, is it just like a speck of dust in a mindless void? The wise man was seeking to know if it's true. Are we just little specks of dust that have randomly mutated by accident in some junkyard of infinity? The wise man was meditating on deep questions like this. What happens to us after we die? Do we have a soul? If so, what is it? Does God exist? And if he or she does he or she care about us? It's interesting to know that human beings get so preoccupied with these kinds of questions that they had to go and invent philosophy and religion. When we get confronted with one of these deep existential dilemmas and we don't know the answers, we, like this wise man, get disillusioned and are unhappy. This is when we experience existential suffering. We can have all the material things and relationships we want, but we still have this existential suffering. And many times it starts early in life, in childhood. Shakespeare says in Macbeth, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And similarly, King Solomon opines in Ecclesiastes, vanity of vanity, all is vanity, there's nothing new under the sun. Is this true? Is it all vanity? This is what the old but sad wise man in the mountains was trying to come to grips with. Or is it possible that each of us are special beyond comprehension, children of a creative intelligence whose eyes and ears cannot yet imagine or dream of the things in store for us? Do we, as children of God, as theologians tell us, as created intelligences, have a role to play in moving ourselves from the image of God, where we begin life, to more and more becoming the likeness of God? These are not only questions for philosophers and theologians, they're questions for us. Now, the traveler in the story knew the answers to these questions was out of his league, so he went on his way, and traveling down the mountain, there he saw by the Ganges River an old woman playing with children in the water, and she looked like the happiest person he had ever seen. She was just doing simple things. She was playing with children near the shore of her village. He asked her, "Good woman, do you know where thought comes from?" She had no idea what that question was even meaning. He asked, "Do you experience existential suffering?" And she said, "What's that?" And he asked, "Do you know if we have a soul?" She finally said, "Leave me alone." So, feeling a little misled, the traveler went straight back up the mountain and found the sad wise man in the exact same place he'd been contemplating before. The traveler began to chastise the wise man for wasting his life in meditation, yoga, breathing, and self-reflection. "This is all foolishness," he said. "You're so unhappy sitting up here. There's a woman just down there, just down the mountain from you in the valley by the creek playing with children, and she's the happiest person in the world, and she's not given a thought to any of these questions." The wise man said, "I don't want that kind of happiness." So we can have pleasurable but sporadic happiness in ignorance, or we can have long-lasting happiness of wisdom and enlightenment. The writer of the book of Acts in the New Testament writes how God overlooked all the times of ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to change their minds and outlooks. The ordinary way, the broad way of pleasurable ignorance, like animals, like bundles of socially conditioned reflexes being turned on and off by every stranger we meet on the street. That's one option for our lives. Somebody says nice things to you and you're swept away, you're so flattered. Somebody says rude things to you and you're offended for the rest of your life. So we're at the biochemical mercy of every encounter with every stranger we see on the street or person we bump into. In closing today, then, I will just conclude with the comments that one of the messages of the cross was that for certain causes, one's existential suffering is worth every price we would pay. This is the wisdom that we're talking about, that we're looking at here. One that pays the price. It's paid for the happiness that belongs to spiritual beings. It's the happiness of wholeness and of healing, of restoration. It's the happiness of redemption and enlightenment, as opposed to a happiness of pleasure-seeking, entertainment, diversions, and distractions, all lived in ignorance. This is part of what the wisdom traditions of the world ultimately teach, including and especially the Christian life. This kind of happiness is precious. You attain it like a costly pearl, more valuable than anything in all the world. And it's in your own abandoned field, a wholeness and happiness, a pearl, a gem. And a great price is asked for it, but it's worth every penny. And we'll begin here next time. And I thank you for your attention.